honor to welcome you all for today's panel discussion, XR Education for Global South. A warm welcome to all the distinguished panelists, moderator, and our audience of the HEXA Symposium. I'm honored to introduce a moderator for this panel, Dr. Dubey. Dr. Dubey brings a wealth of experience at the intersection of academic, innovation, and entrepreneurship. He is currently the Pro Vice Chancellor at MIT ADT University and CEO of the Artel Incubation Center, where he has played a key role in mentoring startups, fostering innovations, and building robust research, innovation, entrepreneurship ecosystem that have earned national and international recognition. With more than 2 decades of experience across corporate, academic, and institutional sectors, he has successfully led incubation centers, supported numerous startups, and contributed meaningfully to policy-driven educational and entrepreneurship initiatives. We are fortunate to have you with us, sir, and please join me in welcoming.
Thank you. No, I know at the outset, first of all, thank you, IT Chennai and Professor Manivannan from XTIC and your extended team members for hosting all of us and giving us this opportunity to deliberate on some of the things. Since morning, we have been listening and hearing and trying to understand this whole pieces of this puzzle called technology, with so focused on everything with the hardware, software, and we are trying to figure out is there a space for a humanware as well, right? And when we look at humanware, the first thing is that we were supposed to end this by 4:55 and it's 4:59. So with all the technology, with all the immersiveness that you want to bring, the human element still plays out. It's pretty dominant. So at the outset, we all have to understand and accept that no technology can replace human beings, because we are creating these technologies, right? So with that outset, let me also welcome my panelist, Joseph from Ericsson. Maybe Joseph, do you want to say a few words so that we know the background and what you carry?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Joseph Isaac, and I finished my PhD in virtual reality and machine learning in IIT Madras here. So I worked on mainly 3D hand tracking as well as several things in HCI called Fitzlaw. And with that knowledge on deep learning and virtual reality, I have now joined in Ericsson, worked on several projects on natural language processing, as well as mainly projects with generative AI right now. So I'm working on things such as RAG pipelines, smart allocations, multimodal LLMs, and so on. That's a little short introduction.
Thank you, Joseph, for your background. May I have Rahul Ray from Flame University, say a few words about yourself and your background?
So I'm Rahul Ray. I was a PhD student here in haptics, tactile displays, and VR. I graduated from here, and now I am a faculty in Flame University, Pune. It's a liberal education setup, but we are running a computing and data sciences school there. And there I teach virtual reality. We do some research on music learning experiences, some spider phobia, some other gaming stuffs as well. So we'll talk about our motive.
Thanks, Rahul. Anmol Srivastav from Triple IT Delhi. Welcome, and maybe you want to express a few words.
Hi everyone. So I'm Anmol, and did mention. Yeah, so I'm heading the Department of Human-Centered Design at Triple IT Delhi, and I'm also heading this lab called the Creative Interfaces Lab. My work is primarily at the intersection of tangible user interfaces and XR, something like tangible XR we're working on. And broadly, you can say, I sort of align myself with interaction design. That is what interests me. And design education and other things is somewhat of interest to me, but I'm in a setting which is mainly computer science and design, which is pretty interesting. So that also opens a lot of discussion rooms.
Thank you, panelists. And I know there's a common thread that runs across all of you is IIT Chennai PhD, but at the same time there is this whole diversity that you bring onto the table because of your background, because of your profile that you have worked. Joseph, you represent a corporate right now. Rahul, you represent a private university, which is not purely a tech university, which essentially most of universities originated from, if you will. It's a liberal arts university, fantastic university in Pune. And Anmol, you are Triple IT part, which is essentially the government-driven ecosystem, if you will. So we have a fantastic panel represented across all three segments, as I call it, triple helix model of any country. The corporate, academia, and the government. The common binding is the goal of how do we achieve this whole Viksit Bharat mission. When we look at this, which essentially is a $30 trillion economy by 2047. Here we are today at a $4 trillion economy in 2025. This whole gap that needs to be filled up from 4 to $30 trillion economy. We spoke about how the product, services, technology will take its own sweet time, sweet pace, sweet contours and the roadmap. But we are here to understand the overall XR education for Global South. So before we deep dive into the XR education of the Global South, maybe why don't you spend a few minutes, each one of you, to lay down the skilling ecosystem when it is looked from a lens of a corporate, the private, and the government side of what should we be doing first to create this skilled workforce of these young students in the context of this whole new education policy that has enabled all of us to break the shackles of the straight-jacketed format of learning things and all of that. So maybe right from the entire value chain of the school students, higher education students, how do we train these sort of young kids of this country?
So one of the first ideas I want to put forward was in corporate, we have lots of technologies. There's many different kinds of technologies we can think of, where you have Meta with all of their high-tech gears. We have, we used to be Oculus, but then now shifted to Meta. But then now you can see all the different techs that comes in there, Leap Motion, Ultra Leap. But then these are technologies which I would consider in the corporate aspect as high-grade technologies. I'll put quote unquote on high-grade because they're all the companies who are trying to look into affordable, and that's another discussion that's going to happen. But to start with, I would say something that corporate people would expect is that people who are into the technology should understand it first. In order to understand the technology from the lowest level, what I would really like is that schools and colleges at the younger stage should be exposed to these technologies in some way, shape, or form. For XR and education needs, we should start to enable schools to have some sort of 3D technology. But I'm saying 3D technology not in the form of cardboard VR. Cardboard VR is obsolete. That is something like I would consider to be a boon in like the past 2 years or something, 2 years ago. But then right now with the kinds that now you can see the technologies like glasses, affordable goggles, and of course HMDs. So there should be some way, shape, or form where schools and colleges can have these kind of technologies, teach them those kind of things which they want to learn using these technologies and with these technologies. So that's like one point I would like to put forward.
And what do you see, Rahul, for the private universities? If you want to add this layer of new technologies to be set up, or the labs to be set up in these, there are idea labs, there are tinkering labs in the university ecosystem that we're trying to set up. How do you see that for enablement of these young kids?
Yeah, so for XR education, especially in a country like India or the global south, what we are expanding this to, we have to identify where it is adding real values. I just don't like to fit something into everything, even if it doesn't fit there, even if it is not required there. We are fitting so many technologies here and there. So we have to identify certain things which is like essential, where XR is really adding value. Like you can't wear a VR headset for 1 hour. You can wear it for certain time. So it should be like such that it adds value to that. So as an educator, as a private university where I come from, or I call to all the educators, we should think about identifying the areas where XR is adding value, and try to channelize the energy, channelize all the startups ecosystem to go in that direction only. Like there are so many gaming, so many car racing games and all. What do that add to the end? So most of the people just go to it. It's just a wow factor. It's like a new technology. You went to it, you felt wow, wow. But it's much more than that. Like I just want you to think of a case. Farmers go through so many things in the agriculture session, and I want to add this to our Viksit Bharat mission as well. So for our agriculture sector, there are so many things which farmers go through, can the AI technology and can the augmented reality, can we augment through the smartphones on the plants that, okay, this is the problem, how can we help that? So the technologies and the technology learning should be in the proper direction. That's what I mean.
So skilling of XR
Yeah.
versus using XR for skilling.
Yes.
How do you decode that side of things when applied to these young kids in the private universities or the schools?
So for learning XR is another thing. There are several challenges to it. One of them is like whoever we try to teach, you can find information to how to learn about it. Like most of us learn through the YouTube tutorials of how to make Unity games, but a lot of people lack with the GPU resources. So if government can help with something like that to set up an infrastructure where young kids can go explore the YouTube tutorials for that Unity games and explore through those things. So that I want to call for.
No, thank you for bringing that up. How do we make skilling easily accessible, approachable, and as you know, our school kids are struggling from different boards of 52 boards in different languages. We have around 6.75 lakh villages. The differentiated access to all of these kind of tools. How do you see the government playing that enabler role, sitting from Delhi, from where you look at it from
Right, right.
IIT Delhi side?
I'll maybe take a stance from understanding XR. The first thing that comes to mind when we talk about XR is immediately headset, right? But if you really see, it is a display technology, and like it was introduced long back, right? It's not like it's a recent phenomenon though. But when televisions were introduced, they were also a form of augmented reality in some way or the other, right? When the projections were introduced. So, given the situations that we are in, and like you mentioned about the diversity of population that we have, perhaps we need to think of ways in which we redefine XR, what stands true for us, right? Because XR can really be just based on projectors itself. We do a lot of experiments with projection mapping and things like that, and they are spatial AR, or even display technology. Like in this room alone, there are 3 displays, right? And they all are part of XR or metaverse in a broader scheme of things. So firstly so it may not be that devices are required, it's just the way that we perceive things. Firstly, that understanding. Secondly, as rightly mentioned, there is a lot of diversity in language. So the content creation that happens, and by the way, content creation is a big challenge, and the consumption of that content is also a challenge, right? And it has to be in a way that can be consumed by different people across different languages through different means and modes. That is one thing. So what I'm really looking at, if I look at it from my perspective as a government institute, maybe to enable better understanding of what XR is, maybe to broaden the definition, broaden it to an extent that it is suitable and just enough to that trigger that curiosity in children in school level, I would say. And that can be done through okay, this is a display, maybe you can just create a game. Okay, this is a projector, you can use it not just for PPTs but for so many cool stuff, right? And then maybe when you get to a university ecosystem, because now universities are filled with VR headsets. I worked in a university where they were just lying around and no one to experiment with them. So I strongly oppose this idea that we don't have means to support these. We have means, right? It's just they are underutilized. And so, firstly, that a curiosity to be built across in the school level, and then narrowing down, perhaps where you have specialized equipments, like just mentioned.
So one of the points which you really mentioned well was underutilized. The way that schools or anything in general is now underutilizing the kind of resources that we're having. You said, right, you could introduce these kind of technologies to school. I showed this a projector. One of the things I really like to suggest was to put STEMs as one of the components using VR and actually teach students using like might be some kind of affordable glasses. I'm calling it affordable glasses, but you could put anything in that, affordable HMD. But the main thing is affordable, which you will get to in a minute. But if you show students like, okay, look here, wear this, you could check planet Earth, spin it around, hold it, change it. If you shake Earth, what will happen? So these are very fun activities you can make for people to be aware and to utilize proper resources that you can do these cool things with VR and AR, XR in general. So those are
No, so thank you. Moving from the skilling side of making it affordability, right? And because we are sitting at one of the best institutions in the country, where it has given us an example or a model or a template for the country, where the language is, how can I reduce the cost of research per square feet? That's what Mr. Mutaji's language is, and I like that matrix. How do you make it more affordable for people to create these new products, new services, kind of thing, right? And what I could see, and all of us who have been a part of this whole research ecosystem, research park, we have seen that unless until you bring these unlike minds together, as the research park says, which is your industry, which is your corporates, which is your academia and the government together, one of the other pieces has to be pulled in, these resources from these different stakeholders, for us to enable these youngsters beyond the skilling side of things. If we want them to drive a lot of IP generation, right? So a lot of this academic R&D that happens ends at either writing a paper in Q1, Q2 publication, or doing an IP. That's pretty much what it is. How do you change that mindset where one, it needs to be, resource has to be utilized? And I'm pretty sure, point blank, I can tell you that around 50 to 60% of the infrastructure that exists in most of the universities is highly underutilized. So when you want to club these two things, how do you blend this multi-stakeholder things, bringing together the unlike minds? And where is our industry with regards to reducing this cost of research?
So one of the things you put forward really well is that there are resources, but it has to be utilized in the correct manner. And there's a very good trio that you mentioned. Corporates is having some resources and they're utilizing it, trying to teach things. But then there's academics, which is having resources, but then they want people to use it. And meanwhile, there's also the government. So I would probably pass it on for each of them. But in terms of what you were talking about in research and affordability, one of the cases that I was thinking about is when we are showing our VR devices that, okay, here, this is something affordable, and then you want to incentivize it. The goal was not to show like publication, okay, publish this and then make the next person to do something better. If you incentivize this in the case, like you make this kind of VR application, you could get a patent, and this patent can turn to an app, and this app turns into money. Of course, in the end, it's all like what we were telling, that in the end, it's all based on the capital. If you make something that is getting really good generous income and people is more incentivized to get something which is giving them income than something which is giving a publication in the end. So as in corporate, like in plain language, like it gets money done, it's good.
Thank you. So from that money-driven research, unless until you show them the money, they won't come to the academics. So how do you still inspire these money-minting corporates to support institutions like yours, Flame, and other private universities?
So one thing is there is no continuous dialogue between academia and industry. So that is very necessary. So the demand should come from academia. Demand should come from industries who should do a market study to find out, okay, this is what we need. Then you figure out you come to academia to conduct a proper research on that, and then you should start making things on that and take it to market. So that demand is not coming. In the end, what it is happening at academia places is we are just looking at different things and we are finding out problems which might not be actual problem in market. Yeah.
So I think fantastic. And this is where I also experienced this, that in the academia they think this is a problem.
Yes.
Whereas it's not to think, it's to validate whether it's a real problem or not. That is where the corporates have to create these problems first, not the solution, right? And which is where I think I would like to add Anmol to this whole dialogue, that the Smart India Hackathon platform has now become the world's largest open innovation challenge. It is because of this participation. It is because of this whole coming together where they roll out the problem statements from these ministries, from these corporates, and then they ask these young kids to take a stab at providing the solutions. So these platforms like Smart India Hackathon, the recent announcement of RDI fund, which is of around $12 billion, which was never there in the country for the researchers. I think there are these government schemes which are helping all of these things. So on the research side, the challenge that we see from the government is the execution part of it, right? I mean, all the researchers want to do things, but then there are these GFR rules, then there are these utilization certificates, then there are these Hajar milestone reports and reports after reports, and then they still don't get their due in time and the quantum of that support that they need. That's where our researchers are struggling. How do you see that from where you are sitting right now?
So luckily, I mean, haven't faced it quite a lot. I do know that.
Because you are in government, probably.
Right? But I strongly feel that perhaps the industry should adopt institutions. There will always be this disconnect, and there will always be forums like this one where we meet once in a while and then we always part ways, and we're happy that something happened. But we need to sit together every day to figure out what is happening, right? And in US, there are universities that have been adopted or been funded by industry partners as such, right? And that is where the lag is, because it's fine, you give CSR funding or whatever type of funding to establish a center or something, right? But you have just given a chunk of money, and now the researchers are just doing something within a time frame, and they report and whatever deliverables come in. But what if assistant professors are also funded by the industry and they're working full time in research universities or any other universities? So that can sort of narrow this gap, right, about industry academia. Government has taken a lot of initiatives, a lot of hackathons that are happening. But for some reason, we always see it ends up with an award ceremony and press this thing. But then what happened afterwards? Well, I've read about so many things, right? Even in toy hackathons that happened. What happened to those games? We don't see them commercially available off the shelf now, right? So even that will be futile if no mechanism is created. A big part of doing research and other things is that it has to see the market. It has to affect the people that it is meant for.
Sure.
So there needs to be a pipeline that has to be done. Initiatives are in place, iHubs, and those have been initiated. But I think they're yet to see the light of the day.
Yeah, no, thank you, and I think there are very valid points that you have shared. But at the same time, when we move over from skilling side to the research side, eventually we are all talking about where is the money, right? As he pointed out, right? And when we look at this whole AVGC sector, AVGC XR is a sector. There's a recent report where government of India has projected this to be $100 billion industry by 2030. When you look at those kind of aspirational numbers and some of these initiatives where in Mumbai they have created an IIT of creative areas, which is called IICT right now. I think how do you map this up in terms of skilling is good, you create capacity, right? IP is good, you end up doing some research for whatever good, bad, ugly reasons, but then it needs to translate. It needs to translate in terms of commercial, it needs to create wealth, it needs to create jobs, right?
On this IP, I wanted to add one thing. The thing is, when I'm speaking on terms of actual experience, when let's say that the money wise and everything is all done, there's funding, there's things, and then now we're having the discussion. There is one part in the discussion which gets destroyed. That is like what you're saying. When industry people are saying we want this person, let's say that we have this XYZ resources from industry and academia put together. Industry wants this to be some XYZ application that generates money. Academia will expect this XYZ application to generate 5 different journals. Now you can see the disconnect which is happening. So
that's why it's called bringing unlike minds together.
At the same time, right? Things should not always be functional and driven by some output. It benefits the industry. Because academia is a place where you can experiment and fail, right? And it should be that way, that failures should be encouraged. Funding should be there for failures as well, right? We always expect that if we have funded you with certain projects, there has to be an outcome and it has to make an impact. But that is not how innovations took place, right? Most of the innovations, they eventually fail. And then
I totally agree on the failure aspect. But yeah, they can fail. You could try different methods, and all those different methods can be noted. The only end point, like in the end, you either get an idea or you will get a product. But Of
Or
course,
you will
acting
get a
and
learning from that.
but we would expect a win-win situation.
I think I've succeeded in making sure that my panelists starts talking to each other. Moderator. I'm sorry?
Also with the parts.
I'll get the participants dive into this whole discussion, I think the fail and team things that we keep on talking, and I say this very often to our youngsters that fail really is first attempt in learning, right? And if you move from the services side of things to the product side of things, we start talking about how do you move the notches of your TRL levels, right? And if the institutions have never thought through that level, you will fail. You're bound to fail. But start failing in teams, because when teams work, the dreams work, right? That's how it goes, right? So and teams is essentially that together everyone achieves more. So the fail in team is always go glove in hand, but it needs to be powered with some mentoring, some advisory,
Right.
some CSR support, some labs, some infrastructure, and little bit of
governance.
the governance will happen through the joint collaborative effort. It cannot be just one way versus another. If government had a say, the way government killed the entire RMG industry because there were some reasons, right? The startups were still doing good business out there, right? So it cannot be just unilateral governance. But at the same time, the advisory, the mentoring, the problem validation, the laying out of the solutioning infrastructure, and a little bit of money as well, because these youngsters really need money to build these prototypes, because as you rightly pointed out, even the equipments that we see for XRs, they are pretty expensive, right? That still opens up a new challenge of how do you make it more affordable in terms of that. So anything coming from university space about the startups, how do you inspire these young kids to look at entrepreneurship as a career choice?
Yeah, so I think it can be an interesting point because a lot of students do projects, right? And if it is sort of made as a mandate that you have to look how,
Checkboxes.
yeah, a checkbox, right, or a rubrics of sort that, fine. You said that you have created, let's say, like a smart mirror, right? And you want to open up a startup on that now. Do you go to that process? You know how do you register a company and then eventually, go through all that, go through the pain that is there, right, during this whole semester. Right now, it may not come easy or as easily as it is said, right? In this regard, I would say some initiatives within my institute, like we have something called as an entrepreneurial track BTM, bachelor thesis project, which is primarily targeted for students who want to get into a startup system and all. Right, so these type of things should be enabled, and maybe not at university level, but it can also be introduced much early. Government initiatives like T hubs and other things, they are so good, right? Adult tinkering labs, and they can perhaps be, a driver for this innovation. But again, these kids needs to be handholded initially. But like what Prince showed today morning, that this nephew just created a game, right, through AI. I mean, we are living in that era, and things are quite possible. Someone needs to, handhold and do this part, and this thing should be enabled. And also, there has to be a validity on research, just like there is expiry on, your medicines. You should say, yeah, after 5 years, your research will expire. Right, because now the new things have come in. So that is kept in mind. I think maybe it leads to a pressure. This thing.
No, thank you. I think I'll just touch upon what he just mentioned. See, if you look at our higher education system, there are around 4.3 crore students, right? There are around 26.1 crore young kids in our school ecosystem. Even if you look at 10% of them picking up innovation and entrepreneurship as a career choice, you are still the world's largest ecosystem, right? Nobody comes close to these numbers, right? But my biggest challenge is what you just touched upon very briefly, and I want to get your views, is how do you train these young kids who are just looking for raising capital, paisa kab aayega, kahan aayega, the elements of self-regulation and good governance. People have to also understand that this money comes with a lot of responsibility, right? The guardrails have to be in place. How do you ensure with this new sort of technologies where even the governments are trying to figure out what is right, ethical, regulation? How would you see corporates playing that role of while the world figures out the right and wrong of the ethics and compliance? how does this corporate play a role for good governance and self-regulation for these young startups to pick up this whole thing?
So one of the things I would also be asking Rahul to also touch upon was there's some regulation which is already at play in India, which is also with the courtesy of Professor Manivannan, that VR corridor that we're actually on par with making. If we join such regulations with the power, like, okay, we are supposed to have this such and such schematics, this such and such level of detail should be taught, and if in academia as well as in school level, if you teach mild things like you can learn it in this way, like what you just rightly pointed out, that it should be shown to you well before that you could even think about it. Of course, you could come to a very high institute and then suddenly you see that, okay, there's VR. But then what about the person who didn't visit that institute yet? How would they know? They should know. That's the visibility perspective. And one of the things that as a corporate I would agree upon is we need to have this kind of a board where members from corporate, academia, and government is present to see that, okay, these steps should be taken for VR. These things should be taught related to XR. I will call it XR from now. Sorry about the terminology, but for XR, and these kind of technologies are aware for you to use at the lowest level possible. Maybe not so much in school. In school, people are still learning science, but then in colleges, it's a very good opportunity. What about in academia?
Yeah, so around the startups, I'll pivot back to there. So universities do have some boards to govern the startups, mentor them towards the frugal things what Manivaran sir mentions all the time. So what happens? I'm going to take example of one of our close friend who was here in IIT Madras. So he did a research project over here, and then he wanted to convert that to a product. And simultaneously, when he graduated, he had offer from IIM A/B, one of the top IIM. So he chose, like, if I do the startup, I go through all these pitching here, they are getting some funding. I will already learn what a MBA graduate will learn in a year or two in the classroom setup. So he went through all that. He made really cool product along with it. He got the IP. IIT Madras helped him with all the things which is required. He did really good. Sadly, the product didn't come out to market, but he learned all those things. Later, he moved out to industry for jobs. But the the part what IIT played there for him when he was trying for different things in his startup. That's what is essential from all the universities set up wherever young kids are going through the startup path. It's not very easy path for students actually. Yeah. Once you are into the late 20s, responsibility starts piling up. So how they are getting mentored over there, that is very essential from the part of university how we are taking care.
Yeah, for the government, this is a pretty new thing that the government has to do the regulation and the governance kind of thing dictated from the government side of things. In these new technologies, new form of technologies, it's getting very difficult for even the governments to even first make heads and tails out of it. So, how are you looking at from the government perspective for these guardrails and these ethics and compliances?
Um, a lot of information needs to be, put in place before any decision can be taken. And that then entails understanding the context or the requirements, and those are local requirements, by the way, right? So it cannot be that India introduced a policy and that will be applicable in every state. Right? That may not be possible. So within state level, then you start getting different set of data or touch points, right? And you have to sort of act accordingly in that way. So perhaps a good understanding of the context, right? The thorough part where we understand what the needs are. That is one thing through which can inform how policies or how decisions can be made. Definitely, a lot of help will be required because to skill people, private universities play a very crucial role because government of India alone cannot do it, right? And hence the reliance on private universities and private schools. Uh, so mandates for them. Industry needs to play a bigger role, right? Because industry always comes to your students are not well equipped with this thing or that thing. But if you are cooking a curry, you also need to add spices. And they may come in form of CSR funding or knowledge. This thing, right? But at the same time, the innovations that take place in the university, you should also be open to taking them up right, to commercialize one is that. So a lot of information from the ground and how it can inform a policy or any decision that is being taken. And another thing that I would definitely like to add at this point is, to also enable this entrepreneurial or innovation mindset. That means you get into the tinkering part early on, right? And one very, like, one of my favorite example is Arduino. How many of you are aware of 8051 microcontroller? Right? I studied about 8051 and we used to use assembly language, and it was truly like it used to boggle us down. Not everyone was very comfortable with this, but Arduino break that barrier. But aaj ki date mein, if you see anything, you find an Arduino powering the hardware innovation that is there. Right now, it is not a point whether you should use Arduino or you should use STM. This is not industry. No, but it broke that barrier wherein the learning curve was too high, but it became so low that it is enabling innovation, right? Sure. So we need to push forward for such kind of things for XR, right? How can we enable our students to not just think about headsets, but think of XR in a very broad way, because that also include haptics. Sure. Unfortunately, the haptic part is always missed when people talk about XR. It's always a headset. The hardware plays a bigger role, and there are so many things that are coming into picture. Right? So how do we reduce this barrier for learning that it fuels innovation? And once the innovation is fueled, then definitely entrepreneurship will take up.
Sure. One of the good points you mentioned in there is this kind of adaptability, that we're not looking at just to tinker and fine tune for India, but then that's the whole aspect. We want to make it something into global south, and with that, if we make something which is very easily adoptable, a kind of a framework of XR that is easily adoptable, then you could start to go like mainstream and be quickly and widely adopted. Something, for an example, the UPI. UPI was something which used to look so hard, but now everybody is using UPI. So even to autos, rickshaws, and vegetable vendors, I'm just giving examples as to how much is the diversity of UPI, which is something that is actually something electronic in nature, but then it's so much widespread and used. I'm imagining something should be so easy to be done in XR that can be implemented across such wider ranges.
No, essentially, how do you create this whole path of least resistance so that people can hook onto these things by making it faster, better, cheaper,
exactly,
and easier to be used? I know there may be a few questions, so if you can, I'll open it up for the floor to have a few questions. Please go.
Okay, was nice. Sir has put questions very well, and you also gave a good reply. So I will come with the STEM part and the Adreno part. So imagine, say I have a product, I have developed a product, and I think you know that currently schools STEM they are spending like 4,000 or 5,000 or even 3,000 for one kit. Okay, and the kit will be given to a group of students, maybe a 5 or 10 students. Okay, so there will not be an individual experience, and it will be a group project. Say I have done something using XR. Okay, and it allows to cut down the cost. Okay, and also it gives one kit per one student ratio. Okay, and also that gives you a personal experience. Okay, so they will do the experiment, and the teacher will use an XR based app to add it. Okay, now I have this one. So what should I do next?
So if you're talking about in terms of apps, there's so many possibilities.
No, not just apps. I haven't set up. So I said Nano, right? So he said 8051. So that cost around 400, I think now, and Nano cost around 200. For the same 200, I can make markers or something similar to the same Nano, which will cost maybe 5 rupees or 3 rupees only. So I'm cutting down the cost of expenditure on the microcontroller parts. So I have already developed something, and I presented in a CBSE STEM level DLD. So I got selected, and I have it was forwarded to Delhi. So it was only for conference. Now I want to make it into a product, and I'm ready to give it to open source also, because I know that most schools will not buy it. And actually in my panel, one of the persons was already a person who was selling this kit. Okay, so he was not happy with me making it cost effective. Okay, so now I have it ready. I don't know how to take this next step.
No, exactly is one of the points that we were telling about. One is cost effective. We have one route which is making it more easily affordable. The other route is making it better in what you're actually doing.
Okay.
And then the other route is going widespread and where you're using it. So if you have done all the way up to cost effective, well and good, now you have a very good model. Now with that very good cost effective, you could do the other two streams, which is where to use it and how you use it.
Okay.
So when you're doing where to use it, now you could use it in, now you're currently using it in education. You could use it in academia. You could now use it in training. There's so many different applications which require better training responses. Like, for example, a person who has to do high danger value stuff, like let's say a person is doing, the one thing that just quickly came to mind is digging, okay? So in digging, if you dig the wrong item, the whole tunnel collapses. If you dig correctly, you open the tunnel further. So now you have a very cost-effective model that you could give to miners to teach something on how to dig and where to dig. I'm just giving some random idea. I thought it would probably split seconds, but with that, now you could think of all the other different elements that you could apply this field to. So the possible the imagination is endless, but you could apply it to every different field, and then it will be how well you're applying in that field. But if you have already done one part very well, then that's good. The affordability aspect. Now it's where and how.
Any other questions?
The 3D, what you mentioned about the Arduino things, do you have like a XR simulated module for Arduino kits, something like that?
No, like I have the, if you want.
Okay, can we take that offline?
We can take
Yeah,
that.
how many
Okay,
we need, we will have to wrap it up.
Okay,
Sorry for that.
I have studied the Unity 3D, so I have made an app. So the thing is, I will be giving replicas, plastic replicas that I made. So two students, okay, so each student will get one kit. And jumper wise, I think it will cost you around 10-20 rupees. So they have to connect the components and then call the teacher. The teacher will only have one mobile phone and the app will be installed in it. So when the mobile phone sees the schematics, it will check and validate if it's correct or not. Because the other part is teachers also has to be trained in STEM. They also need to know the microcontroller if the connections are correct. And also most teachers are afraid that if what happens if the student breaks the component, who takes responsibility? So now here that goes away. So the teacher will have the app in the mobile and she will validate and say it is working on. In validation, what I'm planning is it will show how the thing will work. Like if it lights up, if it gives sound, some kind of 3D model will come there.
Right. Any other last question? I know we are running short of time. If you have a question for the panelist, please.
I'm coming from an NGO, so which offers education to rural kids. So we recently set up a VR lab to introduce science concepts to learn through VR. So I want to know, I don't know, I'm a beginner. I want to know if this exists or will be exist.
That's a very good idea to teach different VR concepts. That's what the whole.
What is the question?
Yeah, tell me. Tell me.
To make the concepts in clearly, it takes a lot of resources and knowledge, computing power and all. Will that be easier in future, like making reels kind of things, so that more of the creators will join and make the education content easily available?
So if you're talking in terms of pure technology, technology is getting faster and cheaper, much faster and cheaper. I mean, even right now, within 3 years ago, we were looking at something which is like this big on our head, and now people are talking about wearing glasses. So technology is getting faster and cheaper. And if you're talking about trying like creative, making apps and different things for teaching different topics, it is there. There are different apps which is like, okay, here's the globe. I even told you the planetarium because there is an app which does that. You can take the world and
some kind of planetary
things. So like that for different.
A lot of learning sleep goals and the installation capacity of the laptop and all.
Yeah.
So can a normal creator easily create more content so that it will be easily available and more of the quality contents we can get? We may have start up small product. Another creator will create more realistic product. So will that be easily available in the future? Or it is readily available now?
So I think
Whatever you're mentioning is actually a big challenge, right? And there are platforms wherein you can create content. Okay? Some are free, some charge money, right? Most likely that will change in the future. But for now, if you're looking at, then you can definitely use the existing platforms, right? If you're creating content in, let's say, VR, so you can definitely use the Shapes XR or all these type of platforms that are available, right? But if you want to create, or if you have if you want to have more freedom, then for now Unity is there, and it involves certain learning, right? Luckily, with AI and all this coming in, people are able to create content, right? But learning always
learning
remains.
curve is
So
very big.
I think
So
this
is there
actually
anything
highlights
readily
a
available?
need that something just like Instagram, just like your reels can be
So
created.
when everybody comes to collaborate, so the content will be readily available, easily accessible.
Yeah. So that will change. In fact, very recently, Facebook announced the SAM 3 model, the SAM 3, right? Which will help in content creation. But that actually raises a very important concern for the global south, because now you were mentioning you are working at a grassroots level, right?
Yes.
You're going in villages and other places, and then you're. So how do we make these technologies more accessible? And
If we want to create a simple globe, and it will take some 10 hours means, if more of the creators are joining, so it will be in some 3 minutes, 5 minutes.
There's some very good platforms that you should check, like GitHub,
Sketchfab is there.
Sketchfab,
3D
GitHub. There are
3D
lots of open source websites which openly put their 3D models online, and you could download it, use. And if it's for educational purposes, most of them even give open-ended licensing for it, so that's also an option. But yeah, if I want to give something off the top of my head, Sketchfab, and then there's GitHub, and in social media itself, some people actually just paste their content saying that here, try it.
There's something called Godot.
Godot is a game engine which is much easier to learn than Unity.
Right, I think you can continue on this topic with him offline also,
Okay,
because
yeah,
in the
sure.
interest of time, let me thank you, Dr. Joseph, Dr. Rahul, and Dr. Anmol for taking time out and sharing your thoughts on this whole topic of XR education for Global South, because as we try to understand the hardware side of things, the software side of things, I think your comments on building the humanware, which is very difficult part, and I think when we add the complexity of this whole regionalism, the languages and things like that, so I think there are some triggering points. Hopefully we'll probably build upon that in offline fashion. But thank you once again for sharing your thoughts, and thank you all of you for patiently listening and asking relevant questions to make it more lively. And I think my job was easier because we had a lovely, wonderful panel. So thank you again for coming. Do I complete? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We need XTIC.
Exactly that.
Thank you. Will you want you want to come this side? Okay. Red and blue with those light shades will. After we have to also worry more about the XRVR, right?
Color combinations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.